is Anthony. I believe I know very many of you, I'd say most of you, but for those of you that do not know me, I'm a current sophomore that's living in Houston, studying at Rice University. I'm majoring in electrical engineering. I'm Belen class of... Oh, is it not? Can it not hear me well enough? Okay. Oh, I see, yeah. Is that all good? Good? Okay. I'm majoring in electrical engineering. I just finished up my second year now. I'm going to start my third. And this past June, I had the privilege of serving as a missionary in North Dakota for essentially a full month, 31 days. So I'm very thankful to you all, especially for, of course, giving me the opportunity to speak and share my experience with all of you, but also because you all made up most of my fundraising, actually. So I was asked to fundraise $750 to go, and with your help, I was able to hit a little over $1,400, so almost twice the amount I had intended or needed. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope what I share with you today resonates with you all, and that you see the beauty of where those funds went. So I'll start. I served at a mission in the Turtle Mountain Indian Native American Reservation in North Dakota that's operated by the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity. You might have heard of them this past week. There's a member from the ACU location at UF who is starting a full-year mission over at Belize. That's their flagship big mission. I went to perhaps one of the smaller ones, but for the summer, it ends up being one of the bigger ones, just because there's so much going on here. At this specific mission, there's 3 parishes and a parochial school that is K through 6, which is kind of interesting. It has no tuition, actually, because there used to be a tuition for a long time. It's my understanding it was something smaller, perhaps like $2,000 per student. But then there wasn't enough funding to actually keep the school going. I asked about that, and I found out that the diocese is actually helping keep the school active and going. And so not only do you guys have faith in this mission, the diocese itself has a lot of faith in what it's there for and what it represents. And yeah, a lot of the kids that I work with went to school there or were still going to school there. So I can speak from firsthand experience that you see a lot of the formative experiences, and you can kind of also see who went to that school and who didn't. It becomes evident over time. And I can expand on that in a little bit. What makes this particular mission special compared to other mission organizations like Blue Mission and whatnot, this is in the context of a religious order and not just a religious order with an active apostolate. It's one that has an ecclesial family team structure. So the big idea here is that the society is made up of, this is a picture from one of their older general chapters, but it's made up of priests, brothers, sisters, and lay members, including families and individuals. So the idea here is that they can cater to the needs of the community completely. So the priests can cater to the sacramental needs, the brothers can cater to perhaps more manual labor, like serving as sacristans, that kind of thing. The sisters, they tend to be very heavy on the prayer side of things or in the teaching side of aspect. And the lay members cover anything that the religious can't cover. So for example, when I was there, we'd have lunch, a lunch period with all the kids. Lunch was provided for free. And the religious all have an obligation to pray daytime prayer at some point. It's part of their vows. So during that time, we'd kind of make sure everything was under control while they were doing their obligations. So it's a very holistic way of addressing a community's needs, and I found it to be very effective, and I went there in good part because I wanted to see more. I wanted to see what that looked like. So at the mission this summer, this was with the intention of a summer camp, St. Anne's summer camp that ran for 3 weeks. In total, we had 32 missionaries, and 13 of them were Formandian religious, 19 of them were lay missionaries. who came to help out. It's actually all of the Formandi in the religious order were there for this like province. Their province is the Americas, with perhaps maybe some smaller exceptions, but they all were there and interacting. So it was interesting being able to interact with not just the religious or the religious that have taken simple vows, but also those who have not received habits yet, some of which I can point out in this picture. So you can, so here, you know him, I know that. That is Brother Colt. Brother Colt does have
One of my
habits.
best friends.
Yeah. But yeah, some of the religious information, you'll see some of them. She has like half a habit, if you want to call it that, but like that habit is gray. For the people who are, for Mondi who are postulant, they wear that like longer gray habit, or like, it's not a habit. It's like a white dress shirt and a long gray skirt. The aspirant, yes, aspirants, they still wear more so like t-shirts and still like long skirts. But yeah, there's actually not very many.
Their labels are actually aspirant and postulant?
Yeah.
Aspirants and postulant.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe there isn't a postulancy for men. There's the novitiate. So the term just is different for the different genders of Formandi. But yeah. And it was a really interesting experience, not just to meet religious, but also the missionaries were from all over. There were 5 that were from New Zealand, and they were all native from New Zealand, which was very rare. You don't see that often. 2 were from Mexico. They're twins. One of them is here, and the rest were from all over: Texas, Michigan, Florida. So there was a really beautiful representation of the church across the world, and that was very nice. So now I'll just get into the mission itself. So the first week was spent more so planning and working to set everything up for camp. You can see one of these kind of planning meetings here. This isn't necessarily everyone, but we would meet most days. We had a full day retreat the second or perhaps third day we were there to make sure we were ready, just not just physically, but also spiritually, to cater to the needs of the community. We'd also have holy hours every morning before the Blessed Sacrament, and we would also pray solemn morning prayer, which is really nice and very emotionally provoking. I can put it that way. It was very, very beautiful. But yeah, we had a lot of incredible experiences praying as a community and working as a community before camp started. One of the big things I helped out with was that there were a noticeable amount more female missionaries than men there. So all of the men, we all kind of came together, and we kind of helped tidy up all of the shrubbery around. And we basically had a pickup truck, and one of the brothers, he would go around like cutting the loose branches that were on the trees or the ones that really stuck out or that didn't look right, and we would go around collecting that. And that was with the intention, firstly, of just bonding, that we would all get to know each other and kind of get a feel for what our strengths were, but also on the part of the people administering the summer camp, seeing what we were good at, seeing what our strengths, weaknesses were, and seeing what roles we could fulfill within the camp. This first week was dedicated to helping us learn about the community itself and like what we were working with, because this was unlike what most of us have ever experienced in our lives, and so we just needed to know what we were doing essentially, and like who we were working with. What I actually found was kind of interesting. Before, I thought the population wasn't necessarily very Catholic. The population is 80% Catholic at this Native American reservation, which is pretty eye-opening. This is obviously an approximation, and this can vary across years, but that is the estimate that I received from one of the religious. So I thought that was very interesting. Of course, the numbers also vary at Mass. You know, when you look at like daily Mass, vigil Masses, like Sunday Masses, like you're not seeing 80% of the population. I wouldn't. You know, I'd say that's a trend that you might see across the country. People who identify as Catholic but perhaps aren't confirmed or don't practice regularly. But that's something I definitely noticed here, and I honestly saw it. I totally did not see 80% of the population. I really don't think I did. And I'll touch more on that later. But yeah, there's a big chunk of the community that identifies as Catholic, and even more that identify as Christian that aren't in that figure. And of course, other smaller miscellaneous religions in there. So one of the aspects that was brought to our attention at one point was the impact of boarding schools, which you may have heard of. I will not elaborate too much, just because that is a very big topic, and it's also kind of a loaded topic. But essentially, many Native American communities harbor bad memories from poor treatment at boarding schools that were often managed by religious orders. It was often the Western society at that time, in perhaps the 19th, 20th century, felt that they needed to instill Western practices, cultures, customs, beliefs, languages in Native Americans to make them civilized. And some communities harbor a lot of that. This one doesn't, which was very striking to me. I did not speak myself to someone who went to one of these boarding schools, but there are people around who did go to those boarding schools. And by the time that they went, I mean, their parents went to a boarding school, their grandparents, their great-grandparents went to a boarding school. So there was this aspect of erasure was pretty old. It wasn't new anymore. So for them, you'll have like a wide range of experiences when they try to describe their time at their boarding schools. It was like, oh yeah, I loved it. Like the nuns used to treat me like so well. Or it's like, oh, it's school. Like it just felt like school. That's what it was. And there's some people who had bad experiences. But the lasting impact of that, there's not really a strong negative like collective memory from that. And I felt kind of struck by that. This is something that like when I was at Belen, like I was taught about, and like this is a big deal, and it is a big deal. But I thought it would still have a lasting impact in how, Native American communities saw the Catholic Church. That was not the case. There are some people around who are not around the reservation that are not big fans of the church. They're there. And one of the interesting things that I was told was that, there's people in Miami that aren't big fans of the church. There's people everywhere that aren't fans of the church. But here, because it's a small town setting, everyone knows you're not from there. And in the case of like the 5 people from New Zealand, like they don't sound like they're from there either. So they definitely don't. The 2 people from Mexico, they don't sound like they're from around there. So it becomes pretty obvious when locals see them that like, oh, you're not from here. And everyone knows vaguely what's happening around this time of year. This summer camp's been going for, I believe, a little over 20 years, around 20 years. So it's been going for quite some time now. And yeah, they know like that guy's with the church. That group is with the church. So you're always, of course, as a Catholic, encouraged to act correctly and like say the right thing at the right time when you can. But here, there's an especially large amount of eyes on you, because it's not just the children that you're interacting with, because principally that's what I was there to do. I was there to help and minister to the kids as a youth minister. But there's more to it than that. There is like a very lasting impact to this, not just when the kids grow up, but also in what the adults see and how you interact with the kids and with the adults. As part of the first week, we also did canvassing, which I was not familiar with that term. I think perhaps some of you aren't either. So that's going door to door to basically advertise, which I've never done something of that sort before this. And it was a pretty striking experience. You see where a lot of the families are coming from, like explicitly. I don't have any photos from when we were really outside and like walking around, because we were told to be careful like showing the private lives of the people there explicitly. But I have this picture of us in the car driving around. And this is very early on when I started to see some of what I had heard before about issues in Native American reservations with addiction or with substance abuse, family structure issues, socioeconomic issues. On this particular day, before we left where we were living, which is right next to that church that I showed right at the beginning, one of the priests told us that he had celebrated the funeral for a 12-year-old boy that died in a gang fight in the area where I was supposed to be going door to door. So I was told to be especially cognizant of that, which had just struck the area. And it's also important to note that this isn't Miami. This is a small town environment. Here, like when something happens, the whole community knows, and the whole community kind of takes a blow. So this is a little different than what I might be used to. When we got there, it was actually one of the first houses that we saw there. I remember there's a group of adults kind of sitting outside drinking. They were drinking the kind of stuff that you don't drink for leisure. It was some strong stuff, and we saw like there were also kids around. So we did walk up to them, cautiously, and asked them if they'd be interested in this. We kind of pitched the idea of the summer camp. This is the flyer we gave out, and it kind of describes everything that was going on in the camp pretty succinctly. And we told them about it, and they told us that they had just come from that funeral. I'm not sure how closely they were associated with the boy who unfortunately passed away, but it seems like for them, they're doing it on their front porch. They're getting drunk on their front porch. So it seems like this is like a very standard and accepted way to cope with what's happening to them, which was very striking. And there were kids around. It was like just normal. I don't know. That was one of the first moments. I kind of started seeing that. There was another day we were also going around door to door, and I mentioned there was a missionary who's from the area. She was from that reservation, grew up there, and she told me, like, we were about to walk up to this house, and she told me, no, we shouldn't go there. Their son, fortunately, took his life. It would be really bad to pitch a summer camp for children to a family who's been through that. So we skipped that house. But even just like early on, this is the first week I'm mostly interacting with the religious and the other missionaries. Every now and then I'll interact with the local, and you will when you go door to door, of course. But in terms of really getting to know locals, that hadn't happened yet. I'm already starting to get like a sense of like, there's something here that's pretty different. This isn't like what I'm used to. And I knew I was coming into something that I was not familiar with, but I was starting to feel a little uncomfortable with some of the stuff. This is us also continuing to set up for summer camp. So we had to move all of these canoes and that dock out with a pickup truck we had, which is really interesting. It's also, although hills over there are like kind of rolling, it's very beautiful. It's very scenic. And yeah, it was a lot to set up. I believe I have a picture here of just an example of one of the schedules we had. We had blocks of time for, as far as official activities go, canoeing, big game, which is like a big general game for each of the age groups, a teaching block, which is kind of like along the lines of catechesis, archery, and an arts and crafts period. And we also had, if you go, the chart goes this way, we had a hype and intro morning prayer period. We had a lunch period. We had what they called liturgy prep or lit prep, where essentially we would talk about either the readings of the day, or I rarely spoke about the readings of the day, especially some of the Old Testament ones. I didn't find that very helpful with the kids. I usually just answered questions. The teaching block itself did bring up a lot of points, and a lot of the children there really had never engaged with the faith in the first place. It was interesting because most of them, at least, were vaguely Catholic. You told them to make the sign of the cross, like they knew how to do it, and they did it like they'd known how to, like they'd done it before. But there was also the liturgy prep time. You'll see later, it introduced a lot of space for them to ask questions that they felt uncomfortable asking in a bigger group setting. I thought like the teaching block was like the whole first and second, third and fourth, fifth and sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 12th, which, by the way, this did cover first through 12th grade, which is a huge range for the camp. But with this block, this would be like a teaching section, and then we break that up between the missionaries that were assigned to that block to discuss. And yeah, that opened the space for some more serious, perhaps intimate questions that still certainly needed to be addressed, but were just more uncomfortable in a larger group setting.
How many kids attended the summer camp?
In total, 136. I will say though that that's not like every day necessarily, because this is free after all. So some of the days, like, you know, the kids aren't feeling it for whatever reason. Like we had bus routes, like, and minivans routes, like picking them up, dropping them off. There was constantly like up and at them. Yeah, some days they weren't feeling it. I mean, they never paid for it. Summer camp was free for them. So it's like, you know, they just won't come, or they'll miss a week because like they're out of town with their family on something. So it's a little different than a summer camp you might pay for, where you're like, okay, you know, my kid's going to this, you know, I'm paying for my kid to go to this. Here it's like, oh yeah, it's an option. That'd be kind of cool. But yeah, and then yeah, end of the day, mass every day, which I don't think was a better way to end the day. So yeah, and it was also strategically at the end of the day because that's when they'd all be a little more tired, perhaps subdued. I don't know, the post-lunch crash really starts hitting around like that like 12:55, 1:35 blockish, and then yeah, things get easier from there. And then yeah, dismissal 3 p.m., 9 to 3 p.m. each day. This is an image from the morning prayer or the hype session. Actually, because the kids are on the stage, it's probably the hype session. But it's kind of like camp songs, big, energetic things. I still have most of them stuck in my head. I still sing them to myself when no one's around. Yeah, it was great. And it really served, especially for the younger kids, to help like animate them and get them excited for the day. Some of the older kids, like a senior in high school, you know, singing camp songs with a senior in high school, they really weren't for it. But you know, they were still there. So, and we would try to get them involved. Some of the games involved, or songs involved, like calling individuals out, and so they would have to participate. So, they'd get involved one way or another. But yeah, this activity was more so for the smaller children, but they took to it very well. Yeah, it was very good. Towards the end of that first week, when I was still, we were preparing for camp, preparing for all of these wonderful activities. I was told that I would be helping with the teaching block. So 2 of us would be assigned to the teaching block, and then I'd be helping out with like general catechesis. So I would essentially get to see like all of the children at some point, but like I wouldn't work with a specific group, which I felt that I was very happy about that. I felt very scared to work with the kids one-on-one for extended periods. I'm still concerned in some extent with my social skills in that context. I had not gotten very much time to develop those kind of social skills beforehand. I helped out with one retreat for high school students in my time in Houston. That was about as far as my youth ministry experience went. So like full intensive, like with them the whole day, with like one age group getting to know everyone, I was a little scared for it. I was excited for the breadth. And then on the day before camp started, I was told that based on the amount of forms that had begun to come in, that I needed to help with the 7th and 8th graders, which is like, that's one of the intense groups. There's a lot going on there. I mean, most of you are all parents, so I don't need to say anything there. That kind of explains itself. But I was very concerned. At first, it was presented to me as a choice, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm cut out for helping out with the 7th and 8th graders. And then it was like, yeah, we need your help there. So there was a little bit of concern there on my part, but I also knew that if I needed to do it, God would give me the graces to be able to fulfill the role adequately. So it was a big trust in the process kind of moment. And there was a lot of, I won't mention much of it, but there was a lot of pivoting last minute and like making last minute changes and decisions to make sure everything happened on time, everyone got where they were supposed to be, and that's a pretty suitable example of that. Especially because I had already started planning like lesson plans. But yeah, that didn't end up getting used.
So why didn't you teach them?
Well, I wasn't in the teaching block. I got moved to the 7th and 8th grade group. So there were a few of us that would work on the stations, like I mentioned the big game or the archery. So like there would be a few of us around just to make sure like no one did something they weren't supposed to at archery, to like enforce specifically the rules of archery and like explain that to the kids. The teaching block, like there was unfortunately, because I had to kind of step away from that, there was one person who was running that for the entire camp. Her job was just to teach, and she would have different plans for the different age groups because different people can handle different kinds of material. Yeah, so I didn't end up doing that. I did end up doing lit prep, and that was mostly discussion-centric. So it was like, there was one day we had one of the religious priests. He came in and just like everyone the day before had wrote down a bunch of questions, and he was just answering them one by one. And he did not. That priest was interesting. He did not say no to any of the questions, and he was very much himself in how he answered. But it was also very good. I realized in how I'm expressing that could be taken a few different ways. But he knew how to interact with the kids and how to get them excited. One of the things I also learned when I was there is that good missionaries tend to have big personalities. He's like one of the biggest personalities I think I may have ever met, and he's a religious. So it's kind of, it was pretty interesting. But yeah, so last minute pivot before the first week of camp, and I didn't know what I was in for yet, but I knew I was strapped in, and it was only going one way, so it was exciting. Yeah. So first week, this is when I started to first communicate with the campers. Some of I tend to be kind of serious, so like I'd get actually really excited for the morning screaming, but for the rest of the day, I tended to be a little more subdued. Mostly camp is really just like a lot of fun at the end of the day. It's like a lot of, the canoeing. These are some images from with the smaller children, but the kids in my group, they'd be able to, the 7th and 8th grade group, they'd be able to go around and canoe on their own. They'd be able to do archery like by themselves with like the longer range targets, and that was always a little scary. But it was really more than anything a space for them to have fun, and especially to have fun in not just a safe environment, but a Christ-centered environment. My job there principally is, well, you could say it's just to be a youth minister, but it's to really love the children. And some of them, upon speaking with them, you start noticing that like they don't have that regularly. Like this is when they get to encounter that well, and that's what we're here to do as a group of missionaries. It's really to just love the children, and sometimes that means you have to discipline them because you ask them to do something and they just disobey. And sometimes when they disobey with some things like the canoeing or the archery, that can be really serious. So there has to be a negative consequence to that, and it's definitely a little discouraging because unlike if I were like a school teacher, my job is to teach the kids how to act like correctly. And in a sense, that is like me loving the children, but my job is not to teach them anything. My job is to like get them excited, like excited generally and excited like for Jesus, I suppose. But it's really uncomfortable to have to discipline someone when my explicit role here is to like show care and show Christ's love. And that is Christ's love at the end of the day, disciplining them. But it's especially a little difficult in this kind of mission environment with the summer camp. This is one of the masses that we'd have at the end of every day. So one of the benefits to having a group of campers that were at least like vaguely familiar with Catholicism is that like if I told them like this is a church, like this is what you do, like they're vaguely Catholic, they understand like okay, I should obey him. Now that doesn't mean they would obey me, of course, because they're 7th and 8th graders, but they at least knew that like okay, I'm supposed to act differently here. But it was interesting because some of the kids just wouldn't go to church very often, if ever, even if their families were Catholic. And that they could tell you that they were like vaguely Catholic, but like they never got First Communion or anything like that. So they wouldn't know how to essentially behave themselves in the church, which is pretty interesting. It could be kind of chaotic sometimes, especially with some of the little kids, because they're just smaller children. And the kids in my group just straight up refused to do certain things or like stand, or that would happen. And yeah, there was just that first week was just a lot of learning, meeting the kids, talking about faith, like kind of breaking ground, seeing where they were at, and perhaps where we could go as a camp and discussions and that sort of thing. In the second week, we could dig a little more, especially with the 7th and 8th grade middle school group and the high school group. We used to have youth nights each night. So this is the same chapel where we would have adoration in the mornings, our holy hours. This was part of the building where I lived. It's actually interesting, like if I wanted to go down and pray at 3 o'clock in the morning, that door was open. It wasn't necessarily adoration then, it wasn't exposed, but the Blessed Sacrament was in the tabernacle. And I could go and I could pray there. And that was something I definitely utilized. And on this particular night, this is one of the high school youth nights, the structure varied, but essentially we'd spend maybe from 5 to 6 p.m. Going around picking up the kids who needed to be picked up, which quite a few of them did. I also helped and participated with that. And then there'd be like a pizza, soda, like talk time, and then there'd be like a discussion, like actually like talk kind of like what I'm doing. One of the missionaries, in this case it was her, she gave a talk that day. And then we'd all go and we'd all pray in the chapel together, but it was a little different. Here she kind of, I believe, remember correctly, she started adoration that day. This is, the Blessed Sacrament isn't out yet. She wanted to clarify some things and how we'd all been praying for them for some time. You might see there's a lot of the missionaries are out on the edges here. It's kind of hard to see in this image, but we were all sitting around. There was a group of us that, I tended to interact with some of the high school students, so I felt like perhaps I should help out with that youth night that way. But there was a whole other group of us that was just praying the whole time. There was a big emphasis during the mission of being covered in prayer. So for example, when we were out with the canvassing, we realized like we're not really in a super safe area. Like, we need to be here. We need to like hand out these flyers, and like even though people know that the summer camp is happening, they don't necessarily go to church to like pick up the forms to fill out. So we have to go door to door and do that. And there's some people who perhaps just don't know. So we have to go and bring the information of the summer camp and the details to them. If they have any questions, they can of course ask us too in those situations. But on all of those moments, we were covered in prayer. On the second day I was there, one of the missionaries passed out. She was dehydrated. She's one of the ones from New Zealand. And some mixture of the travel and like all the new foods that well, when you travel, you don't eat especially well, and then you're in a new country with different kinds of foods, especially like very processed, sugary, salty foods. So she passed out that day. We made sure, we prayed as a group for a good while, like an hour perhaps, because that's what we're here to do, to pray, to show love for each other and for the children. And when someone needs our help, that's what we're here to do. So there's an emphasis on that. Also into the second week, there were some unfortunate events that started to develop that I was also not prepared for. In a similar way to the boy whose funeral happened, or that house that we really shouldn't have visited, we didn't visit. There was one student that I remember during the second week of camp. She used to write on her arms a lot. I didn't think about that too hard. I asked her at one point, like, oh, wait, what are you writing on your arm? She was like, don't worry about it. I didn't read it like explicitly, but I could tell it wasn't anything like profane or offensive. And at that point, with a lot of the kids in these areas, you have to give them leeway because they've never been told not to do something like that. So I didn't think about it too hard. Then as the day progressed, or perhaps it was the next day, I saw that she had like small odd cuts on her arm. She didn't look normal. I thought about perhaps like bringing that up then. I decided against it because like I don't know what her household is like, and especially with like if you see something like that here in Miami, you'd be like, okay, you should call Child Protective Services or that kind of thing, or like you should let someone know. But here in this environment, that like this is kind of this is a little more. This is unfortunately normal. You can't call authorities for every situation because there's too many of them. There's too many domestic issues. It's not feasible. As long as the kid is not like in like super immediate danger. And that was something that I also had to kind of come to terms with. Later that day, she kind of walked past me and she told me that I had asked her about those cuts. She told me that with one of them that she had just like cut her arm on her uncle's door or something like that, which sounds weird, but you know, if she doesn't tell me it explicitly, there's not much for me to ask on, right? And starting and stirring up a situation around those kind of sensitive issues, if there's nothing there, can be kind of problematic too. Later on in the day, she told me, oh, I lied earlier. I made that cut myself. And I mean, common sense, and we were trained to speak up when that happened. I went to one of the administrators for the summer camp. I told him what had happened. He'd been there years and years prior, so he knew this girl and her family. But he knew, like, yeah, like even if this has happened before, we need to call home. So he did that, and the family said that this had happened before. This had been a trend in the family and other family members, and that she was on medication for it. At that point, I think some of you might think, oh, well, I mean, this is a liability. Like having a camper around who's harming themselves. Yeah, well, that's not that extreme, but it's who's harming themselves is an issue, and like especially if we know that this has happened before, like, but this is the kind of person that we specifically have the summer camp for. This is who we're trying to minister to. The people who would get like, oh, you know, like, that people might say, oh, don't worry about it, it's nothing, or oh yeah, like the family knows already, like this is their issue, it might just pass on the person. That's not what we're here to do. So there's some extreme situations, and some occurred where kids did things that weren't acceptable, like hit other children, and that results in them going home. But in this case, we decided to let her stick around, especially because everyone, not everyone, one of the administrators knew her family well, and so he knew what was going on a little more in depth. So that was happening, but that was also certainly very alarming. Later that day, she kind of broke down crying, and she was scared because her family, I had to tell her family got called. Just out of full transparency to her, like I needed her to know what was going on. She was very scared that her family might be very mad at her. She mentioned a lot of frustration with being at camp, and especially going to Mass, which at first sounded kind of odd, and then she expressed that you know, she didn't really go to Mass regularly. She wasn't at a church regularly, and every time she'd be there, it'd be because someone died. So there's this. I became aware that some of the families in the community, the main reason they interact with the church in the first place is surrounded around death and tragedy and funerals. And she had only ever really been in a church in the context of a funeral. So every time that we went to Mass at camp, this is after a few days, she's been to a few of the camp Masses, she'd be reminded of death. So I remember that she would like kind of put her head in between her arms and like curl up into a ball and perhaps cover her ears at some point. And it was because of that. She was already in a state where she was especially sensible to these kinds of struggles on the exterior, and then she was being put in an environment that reminded her more of those difficulties. So it was a very interesting position to be in, because we had a policy where like all of the campers would go to Mass, and then we couldn't have like one of the missionaries sitting outside with just one of the, like it didn't work. Like she had to be in the building with us, but I never would have thought of that like going to Mass could be actually spiritual. It could put someone in a space not just where they're vulnerable, but where they're very scared. That was very eye-opening, and it perhaps was more eye-opening with the experiences of what I'd heard of tragedy the week prior. Later this week, one of the boys, he didn't come that day. He'd been one of the regulars. I mean, it wasn't abnormal for someone to just miss a day. That's not a huge deal. But I was a little surprised. Later on, one of the other kids in my group said that his mother's liver had started failing, which is really intense. And especially, he's like a 12 or 13-year-old boy. This is like, this is not an easy thing to go through. I remember we as a group, as a small 7th and 8th grade group, we prayed anonymously for someone in our group who was struggling and whose family was going through a difficult time. It's important, especially in those moments, to highlight like this is like we're Catholic. This is something that we're blessed to be able to do. When we see that someone that's suffering, we could pray for them, and that's something I wanted to emphasize. And most of the kids knew what was happening, just because like rumors and gossip and this happened to who. Yeah, that was happening. I was at Mass that Saturday. The missionaries, we went to Mass each day, and we'd have morning prayer together. Part of the whole Holy Hour theme that period that we'd have each day. At the beginning of the Mass, the celebrant mentioned that he'd been informed that that boy's mother had passed away, and that he'd be celebrating the Mass like with her intention in mind, especially. I was very alarmed by that for pretty clear reasons, because he was one of the boys in my group. I mean, I'd been with him for the past couple of days, and he'd everything up to then with him it seemed like kind of fine. He'd act out sometimes, but that was kind of standard with this group. I didn't think too much about it, and that wasn't related to what had happened. But now this is like, okay, I don't know if he's going to come back to camp at all, because this significant event in his life just happened. And even if he doesn't fully grasp what has just happened now, this is life changing. Like nothing will ever really be the same for him. Excuse me. And so I don't even know what to say for those. I didn't know what to say for those kind of situations. When I said that with the 7th and 8th grade group, I didn't feel socially up to necessarily interact with them, it was because personally, I'm not a person that knows how to show empathy like very well. This is something I've struggled with for a long time. I trust you guys to tell you that, but I was really scared of having to deal with situations like that. That's why I was so enthralled about the idea of doing the teaching group, because I wouldn't have to be put in a situation where I could say the wrong thing. Now, in retrospect, I also recognize that it is a good thing that I was there and able to really develop that. And in those moments, I mean, what really can you say? You try to be there, and I would just silently hope and pray that I would say something helpful, constructive. Eventually, that boy did come back to camp, and was a little surprised, but also glad. He came back after the 3rd week of camp, last week of me being there, and he seemed fine. He seemed kind of like nothing had really changed for him. Actually, he was even there briefly on the day of the funeral, which was actually in the church where the mission was. So it's kind of like high contrast. We have this big, exciting, loud summer camp happening next to a church where one of the campers' mom just died, and they're about to have her wake and funeral. And he was there like in the early morning, dressed in all black. It's more standard there, so he was wearing boots and like a hat. And he was like at the archery event, and he kind of just left partway through the day to go to the wake. But that was one of those things where, like, especially on the family, like, you let your like, perhaps it's good for him to be there and not think about things too hard, but perhaps it's also good for him to be with the family and just spend time with them in that like grieving period. I'm not sure if there's a right decision in that, but I was shocked when I saw him nonetheless. And yeah, later that day, I went to the wake. I didn't have the chance to go to the funeral because it was during one of the activity periods, but the wake was during that lunch period. And so it was just like, I had the time. By that point, the missionaries had already, the one who were religious formandi, they had already done their daytime prayer. So I asked one of the missionaries who was kind of helping out with my group, oh, can you cover for me so I can pray at the wake for a little bit? I actually happened to walk in right when a rosary started, which was kind of convenient. But one of the things I was shocked about was that I had never seen the church that full. Like in any circumstance, in any, of course, not daily mass or vigil mass or Sunday mass, or there was never a point where I saw that many people in that space, to the point where like there's a standing room, really. So I just saw it, and I was so shocked. And this is the wake. This isn't the funeral yet, right? This isn't like the part where you'd probably expect everyone that is involved with this person who has passed away to be around. So that was striking. It's starting to reiterate that like there's this very consistent pattern of tragedy in this area, and it seems like a lot of some of the people are daily mass goers, and they're really on top of it. Some of the folks go to every Sunday mass and they're committed that way. Some of the people don't go to mass regularly, like the family of the girl I spoke to, and I'm realizing that some of them are staying. Like the reason there's a good chance that because the only reason that this community is still 80% Catholic is because there's so much tragedy in this area, and this is like a real and significant way of mourning. It's not because they necessarily interact with the sacraments often. It's not because they see the priests around, there's missionaries around, and it's exciting. It's because there's just that much of a need. Like where else can they really turn? And so that felt, when I kind of came to that conclusion, which isn't necessarily that's not necessarily how it is, but that's really what it looks like. It's no words. That's terrible. I never thought I would encounter that. I thought I would see glimpses of like addiction in some of the people I met, which I did, but not that. That like really messed with my head for some time, because it's so horrifying.
How long has this program been going on? These people, missionaries that conduct this kind of thing. How long?
20-ish years, and this mission 20-ish years.
How many years?
20-ish, I would say.
And no one had thought about building a program, looking at their needs,
Well,
asking questions, what are their needs, and how they can put something.
well, that's what the mission as a whole is supposed to address. So I was there at the summer camp for that time.
Especially with the case of the kids and people doing this harming themselves and relating mass only to when someone dies. It seems to me that they need to do a different focus than just allowing this to continue to happen the way it's happening, because they're experiencing it only through pain. So they need to show the joy of the mass versus only viewing
I understand, but truthfully, there's just that's what a lot of the youth programs. There are youth programs throughout the year that this mission helps conduct, and it depends on the year if they are missionaries there or not, because there's a minimum that needs to be hit for them to have like year-long missionaries there. I think it's like they need 5 year-long missionaries to fill out the form and commit to it. But yes.
Okay, so do those students have other type of programs that are not necessarily missionaries, but social workers? People that deal with people that are, yes, suicidal, because that girl could potentially kill herself. Those are warning signs. I see them. They're my students. I see them. So that community needs a little bit more than that mission. They need professional help. They need social workers. They need therapists. They need that. Are you aware of anything that's been done to cater to those needs and those kids?
Outside of the context of the church, there's
No?
probably something, but I was not made aware of it. I did not interact with it at any point. No one told me like, oh yeah, I've been going to these meetings. I didn't hear any of that. I think it's stemming from the incredible extent of the issue with addiction, and that is across this.
That needs to happen.
It does, and it's very scary that it isn't addressed. And like as much as the church should be there and helping, like they can't help that. There's too much. There's such an overwhelming need. So, yeah. I'll wrap this up. Yeah.
Just to clarify, they're on an Indian or a Native American preservation, and so the U.S. government is limited as to what they could provide as on Native American land. It is run by Native Americans. And so this religious community, I have experience with this religious community. My wife did mission in Belize for a year. My best friend Cole is one of their religious brothers, and then one of our really good friends, Nayeli, is becoming a sister with them. And they are doing, I mean, for one, their funding is very low, and they're also super limited because, again, they're on Indian preservations. And so the church can only do as much as they can provide right now. So they're super limited, not just resource, but also limited just by literally the location of the church, which is the downside. So they're, yeah, it's the reality of the entire community. And they're trying their hardest with the priests, but the priests can only reach out, and the sisters can only reach out as much as they can and offer a hand. But if they don't come to them, the priest can't go to them specifically because of the limitations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really difficult situation. And in that last week I was there, towards the end, summer camp at one point just kind of ends. Like it's the end. And there's all this incredible fun that happens, and it's super exciting. This is the last day of camp. That's applesauce. It's dyed applesauce. And and there's so much fun, and there's so much energy, and there's so much love pouring from each and every one of us, and from the kids back to us, of course. So it's incredible. But then it kind of that's one of the priests. He also got applesauce. You see all this beauty, and it kind of like finishes up. It wraps up, and then that's it. And especially with this, compared to missions, where like I might work with like adults in a community or something like that. I can't contact these kids. They're minors, obviously. So one of the that girl who was having some difficulties and was harming herself, she at one point mentioned to me she was having like a frustrated, sensitive moment. So I stepped off to the side with her. She expressed that these missionaries, they come every year, right? And then they help out for a month, and then they go, and we never hear about them again, and that's it. It's pretty emotionally betraying. You have this support network and all these people that say they care about you and they want to help you out, and then they're gone a few weeks after you meet them. And there's some year-long missionaries that are there, and then they really, really get involved, and they can really help out a lot more than what I could do. Same thing. They can be in touch with the families, but that's not, you don't know what's actually going on sometimes if you're just talking to the families. And it felt pretty betraying to me too. It felt cruel, honestly, to be there for a month, because by the time I was in the third week of camp, last week of me being there, a lot of the kids started to open up and tell me like, oh yeah, this is wrong. Like we started talking about in the little lit prep small group discussion time, they started telling me, we were talking about marriage and true masculinity, true femininity. This is happening. My mom wasn't around, but she's doing better now. I can still see her sometimes. Oh, like my parents told me that they were intoxicated when I was conceived, and that it just kind of happened, and that like, it's just, I don't know. I guess I don't know if they really wanted me, my family is having these difficulties with like addiction, but they're working on it, and I can do better than that, right? And you start hearing all of this, and this is my last week there. I literally, like, there's some points I actually couldn't address because we had to run over to Mass, and then that was it, right? Or this event happened, and they got on a bus, and that was it, right? So it's just, I feel like I could have done more if I was there for like 2 months, or for like even another 2 weeks. I could have done so much more. It's it's this like, and then I can't. It's not even that I can try and still speak to them from a distance. I can't. It's just betraying to them and to the missionaries. And I started kind of falling into this state of desolation after, where I was like just feeling guilty for kind of being there. I did something that you might think is objectively good, right? That even from the outside, even to people who aren't Catholic, they're like, oh, you served a community that needs help for a month, right? Most people would not call that malicious or selfish or anything like that. But that's what it was starting to feel like. It had that effect on me, and I had to go to spiritual direction and talk about it. And I realized like it was the evil one sitting a cross on my shoulders that wasn't real. It was just, I was putting the weight on myself, or more explicitly, I was letting Satan put that weight on myself. Yeah.
Do you know if the tribe is doing anything for them at all?
If they are doing something, I was not made aware of it, and perhaps they're doing something, but the church is doing a lot of work too, and it's not whatever the church and the community are doing, the greater community, it's not enough. And yeah, there was the reflection period in Miami was really difficult because of that. And then now I can see through what was really happening in that period of desolation and see that I did do something objectively good. And I'm happy I was there when I was there. I truly did not think I would go there. I didn't mention this before, but I remember applying and being like, yeah, this isn't gonna work out, but I'll give it a shot. And then I went through a round of interviewing and like, oh, okay, I guess I'm getting through another interview. It's like, oh, okay, I got through that. There's probably, I guess now I'm going, but there's probably gonna be something wrong with the fundraising, and then you guys hit twice the number. So if that isn't an affirmation, I'm not really sure, not really sure what is, or almost twice the number. It was just, I'm very happy I went when I went. I'm very happy I was there, even though there is a bit of a feeling of betrayal and like I could have done more. That's evil. That's betraying. That is the evil spirit at work, and that took a lot of work to see through and to realize. That's all I need. Yeah.
Why did you choose that particular mission?
Um,
I'm sure you look at
Yeah.
different places, whatever.
There-
Why did you go there?
There are other missions that it was more so because of the timeline. So this one happens during the summer when I can and I'm free. There's some missions that also happen for 2 weeks at some of the other locations, and I could participate in, but I felt, interestingly enough, that 2 weeks was too short to do anything. So I very explicitly picked the 1 month mission because I knew I couldn't do a year-long mission, and I knew I also wanted something that should contribute more than the 2 week mission, where it's like you're kind of getting a survey of what you're seeing. You're not really helping very, very intimately.